I spoke about this with the Vice Chairman and the co-founder of Suzlon, Girish Tanti, on his own budget expectations as well as the prospects for both his company and the space. Listen in.
If we look at today, renewable energy is at its core in terms of the energy development in our country, and already it enjoys significant kind of focus areas across the value chain of implementation. Within this, if you were to see, the two primary sources of energy, solar and wind, are the major contributors. And today, of the 500 gigawatts target that we have for our country to achieve by 2030, we have crossed about 200 gigawatts today, where solar is contributing two-thirds and balances from wind. So with this combination, the coupled duo is going pretty well in terms of the growth that we are looking for, and the pipeline of projects which we have today in the country, hitting the 500 gigawatts target by 2030 seems reasonably feasible at this stage. So if you look from a budget point of view, I think several things are being done, and amongst the things that the industry is looking at, we're looking at 2-3 important areas. One is an area where there is a need for harmonizing our policies between wind and solar to make sure that both of them work hand in glove, as ultimately that's very important as an industry to grow and to keep the consumer costs of tariffs under control. And the second one is, made in India. We need to kind of have that strong narrative concluded into policies and implementation to focus strongly on, and wind actually has a significant better situation than solar as far as Make in India is concerned. So that's the other area where we are looking. So these are really the two areas, harmonization of policies and Make in India.
Okay. Girish, your anticipation of the next 300 odd gigawatts are going to be added over the course of the next few years. Do you anticipate that the split is going to be more or less what we're seeing right now, just purely basis the trend that we've seen in the recent past?
Yeah, so there, Alex, we need to see in terms of how this 500 gigawatts was calculated by CEA. So if you see this is designed to ensure that the least cost source of energy is maximized to its full potential. And when we look in the 500 gigawatts, there's a 300 gigawatts to come from solar and about 100 gigawatts to come from wind. So today, wind has just is inching up to about 50 gigawatts. So we are at about 48 point something. And so we have to almost double our capacity. What we've done in the last 30 years in wind, we need to double that in the next 5 years and add a 50 gigawatts of additional wind power. So I think, and the industry is quite well poised to make it happen.
Okay, and I'm glad that you put that into context. There is a bit of an expectation that there will be higher support for offshore because it's not proven as lucrative, some might say, as the onshore wind has been, and you've also not been very aggressive when it comes to the offshore projects. What do you think needs to change for that to be more lucrative?
Yeah, so I think this is very important. I think India is blessed with a beautiful coastline, one of the largest that we have across countries. So from that point of view, we have definitely a significant portion to go offshore wind. However, at this point in time, if we just step back and see the reality of where we are, the total wind potential that our country has onshore is about 1 terawatt. And we have currently just done about 48 gigawatts, which is about 4% of the total wind potential on land. So we've just scratched the surface of what wind energy can do onshore itself, first of all. So there's a 96% growth that is possible onshore first. And already we've proven there that wind and solar both are extremely cost competitive to any conventional source also. And that's why the adoption of green power is moving extremely fast in our country. When we go offshore, things are slightly different. Today, first of all, the cost of building offshore projects is almost 3x of what you would do it onshore. and likewise, the generation benefits which you would get are not in proportion to that kind of scale up. So effectively, with today's technology, best in the world that's available, and we as Suzlon, I mean, we have run and operated world's largest offshore wind energy company out of Europe. So we are familiar with all those technologies. Um, Even if we use the best of the technologies today available in the world, the cost of energy to produce offshore will still be about 2.5x of what you can do onshore. And therefore, the economic viability today for offshore is still a little away. And that's the reason government is looking to give the value gap funding, as we call it, to make sure that they bridge up for getting the first kind of projects off the ground. And I think it's still a journey. But if you see the short-term goal of 2030, the first 50 gigawatts which has to come right now for our next 5-6 years, this will all come from onshore.
Okay.
Offshore journey will start post 2030.
Okay, and developments of technology, I would think, also would contribute to making that easier. Viability gap funding, of course, is one thing that we're looking at very closely. As someone that has looked at the space, of course, your role is the creation of this capacity and the generation of the power. But equally, when you're looking at the utilization of this power, Girish, one would say that the transmission of that power and the utilization effectively of that renewable power is absolutely critical. Do you think, as an allied space, if that develops very, very quickly and if it moves faster than we were envisaged or we had thought possible, do you think that it would be more beneficial for your industry as well?
I think this is a very valid area which you just touched base, Alex. I think if you see today, both for wind and solar, the biggest bottleneck for growth is the electrical infrastructure, the green corridor that is getting built across the country and individually within the states. So I think the more we can speed up that growth of development of transmission and distribution network will speed up. And if you see historically what has happened, we have generated centrally in the conventional energy and then distributed the electricity to the consumers across states and across the country. Whereas the beautiful part about renewable energy is that they are generated almost at the fag end, very closer to the consumers. So really now the challenge is how do you build an infrastructure which can almost in a way set up more distributed generation across different states. And so we avoid less transmission cost on that ground. And one very important part in this is that it's very important that the growth of wind and solar is balanced out, because otherwise the infrastructure which we will build, like just for your example, today the kind of infrastructure that is getting built, say to support the solar ecosystem, effectively that grid just gets utilized during the day for 6 hours. So it's 1/3 of the time the grid is not utilized. But the moment you have hybrid projects where you have wind and solar both, then it is much better utilized. So effectively the return on investment to government for any grid infrastructure buildup, if they do it jointly for wind and solar, is reduces by half. And I think that's where the new system of balancing wind and solar growth is very critical.
Do you think, so I know that you've given us the numbers as well for this target to be hit. You're talking about cognizant of what you've just spoken about. And so therefore the mix, do you think that it's possible to have a higher mix at all, or do you think that it's too tall an order?
Yeah, so I think, so basically, as I'm seeing, actually the mix of wind is even going to be higher, because with the opening up of the private procurement today, a huge amount of India Inc. If you see all the large corporates and even the mid segment, everybody is working to producing their own electricity through renewable energy.
Okay, so that was Suzlon. Of course, their numbers in focus today. Stock is 5% up after a good set of numbers.